What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have a really fun episode. But before we get into that, if you're new to this, you want to make sure that you share this episode. If you get any value out of it, or makes you think, or know someone who might need to hear this, right? So feel free to send that out, or if you have any future questions or topics, you can email that in to the zone podcast 123@gmail.com. We have different segments. So we got rants, we got mental minute game hacks, deep dive educational ones, which is kind of what we're going to get into a little bit today, but also a full length interview with the Scott Coleman, biomechanist from Kinetrax. What's going on, Scott?
Hey, Garrison. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
And I know I'm really mesmerized by some of y'all's videos, and I know Rob Blanc, my business partner, posts you guys a lot, and so it's really cool to kind of see that, and then also some of the back end work of that. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to just hear your story a little bit, honestly, and kind of how you ended up getting to where you are now. And is biomechanics like something that you always were interested in?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this long story short, but undergrad, I was kinesiology. And when I graduated, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. But I went to the University of Delaware. They had a really good biomechanics program. So I just decided just to keep going to school. I always really loved sports, was good at computers and math. So you mash all that stuff together, and it's like a perfect storm for biomechanics.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
then from there, I went to work for a marker-based motion capture company, Motion Analysis Corporation. And then from there, I went into really become a customer of that company in a couple orthopedic labs. So did some pediatric clinical gait analysis, then went into orthopedic research, did some work with pro golfers, US track and field. And then I went to work for another marker-based company until finally, markerless motion capture came about. And it took me kind of really as a biomechanist, as a scientist, to be completely sold on kind of the accuracy of those systems. So I was talking to Kinetrax right when they started, about 2015, 2016. The president founder there, Stephen David, and we were in touch for about a couple of years before the timing was right, before I was really convinced to make the jump from the marker-based world to markerless.
Sure,
And then
yeah.
I've always loved baseball, and that's what Kinetrax started out in, which bread and butter specializes in game and competition. So it was like the perfect meld for me of in competition, baseball and biomechanics. So it's been great.
Absolutely. Well, and I know a lot of other biomechanists out there, and I even flirted with the idea myself of trying to go down that road. But I had an honors thesis where I went in and had to put all those markers on with everyone and then have to go through and sift through all that data and stuff. And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But, then now the technology's sped up enough to where you don't have to worry about that too much.
Yeah, it's almost too good to be true. If I never see another marker again, it'll be too soon, I mean, it has its place, and it's been great, and
Sure.
you get a lot out of it, but now it's just too easy. You're basically hitting start and stop and hit process. You don't need to, not that I'm trying to not I don't know, put a roadblock up for biomechanists, but you don't need to be a biomechanist or a data scientist to collect the data, to
Mhm.
track the data, to turn that data around. Really, it's so simple now. Start, stop, hit process, and you just wait for the data to be there. So people can really just spend their time concentrating on the interpretation of the data, right? And acting on it. It used to be 95% of the time was collecting and cleaning up the data,
Right.
5% of the time interpreting. Now it's complete opposite. It's less than 5% of the time. There's no bottleneck to collect as much data as you want. And then you have all that time to, spend on the interpretation. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's where the magic is, I think, is the interpretation and the application of
no
where
doubt.
from collecting it, right? If it was just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, like cool, but then like why? Like you got to have some actual reasoning, or maybe it's the decision to not do something. You're like, hey, everything looks good. Keep doing what you've been doing. right? Like you
Yeah.
put that in there too. But
Yeah.
I'm sure
Exactly.
coming out from with all the markers and everything to then now having not needing that, you probably can appreciate all of those and the advancements of the technology a lot more, I'm sure.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. It's been night and day. First 20 years of my career, it's been all markers and really has been research. Now it's actionable. Why? Because we can do this in game. You know,
Which
these
is
athletes, it's under pressure, it's in competition. These guys don't even know data is being collected on them.
Mhm.
So it's like truly like a game changer. Yeah, really.
Absolutely. Well, and that was the biggest thing too that I always kind of had a rough roadblock with. It's like, all right, cool. We're hooking all these guys up with all these markers. They're trying to throw as hard as they can and, more of like a, lab setting, but it's never going to replicate what's going on in the game with adrenaline, with the batter in the box, the catcher, right? Unless you just had a really big setup to have all of that already.
No,
But
exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. And one thing we could do now is we do have lab systems. We do have, systems in cages and pitching tunnels. So we can actually compare apples to apples
Mhm.
with in the cage, in the lab versus in competition on the field. So and those studies need to be done, right?
Absolutely.
And they are being done. Wake Forest is doing things like that. Their pitching lab, and then University of Arkansas, they have a in stadium and a lab system. So there's potential to really go down that road and really see what's the differences between, in game with pressure and then just trying to throw a bullpen and, in a lab setting.
Absolutely. Well, and then even seeing like some of those changes that might go from that game setting to then a lab setting and be able to compare the two, I think are awesome to
Yeah.
know you're like, oh, hey, whenever he's throwing at sub max intensity, like he has a tendency to do this, but we don't need to worry about it because it cleans up whenever he goes into the game. Or, maybe it's vice versa. Maybe he does really well when there's no batter in the box. And then you throw that in there, and then all of a sudden things happen and they're different. And now you can quantify, how all that works together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good points. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I want to kind of touch on this too because I know everyone's like really focusing on, and especially myself, you have the pitcher, or now sometimes it's just the hitter. But I think you guys have the capability to collect even more than just those two, right?
Yeah, we could track everybody on the field. Typically, we have 8 cameras focus in on the pitcher, another 8 camera system on the batter, and then we have the ability to add another 12 to 16 cameras to collect everybody on the field.
Hmm.
And the camera technology is good enough now, and the processing power where we can get um, a complete 19 segment biomechanical model of the outfielders, of the base runners, umpires, even, believe it or not. And we capture everybody on the field. It takes a lot of hardware, but we have that technology, ball tracking as well. We
Hmm.
could track the seams of the ball, and all these systems kind of work. They're all modular. They all can work together. One operator, everything's synchronized, so we can stitch all of this information together to get an absolute complete picture of everything that's going on. And then we can even tie in TrackMan, StatCast data, marry all of those other technologies together to, again, give us a bigger overall holistic picture of what's happening.
Yeah, I love that you can actually integrate all those two because it's like one does one thing, and then you're able to put those two together and even have them side by side. And I think there was a video that you showed where you could have even just how all the markers are moving along with, the actual video itself, and you're able to kind of maybe explain to the player like, okay, hey, whenever this happens, this is changing, or maybe you can see the outfielders are starting to cheat a certain way, even on the field, whenever the hitter does a certain move or whenever the catcher sets up a certain way. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can go into with it. It's pretty intense, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we really are giving everybody, our teams, coaches, universities, MLB teams, organizations, we're giving them this tool. And it's really, what question are they trying to answer?
Hmm.
Right. Because there's so much data and you can look at it so many different ways. Um, so it's really it's definitely a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you and I know Wake Forest has the kind of ground reaction force plates. Are those pretty easy to integrate into that too?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All that's plug and play. Any of the force plates, EMG,
Mhm.
anything with a digital signal, we can ingest and we collect that all into one data file. So we bring that into our capture software. And then things like TrackMan, Rapsodo, HitTrax, Newt Force, anything with a timestamp, we can we can program that in based on those timestamps. We have our own database and API, so we ingest all of that data, and then with our web reporting software, you can slice and dice down to this really granular level based on all these other technologies, data and metadata. So
Mhm.
if you want to look at, a induced vertical break of more than 8 inches and spin rate over 2,400 RPMs and a pitch type of, just four seam fastball, we can query all that within like seconds within our software.
It's all
Yeah.
condensed, and then you're able to just look at that, which is awesome because you're able to, sift through all that versus having to manually go through all of it. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
ever
It's all
have
at your fingertips now. So yeah,
you
it's
ever
great.
had to manually go through that? You're like, oh wow, this is a game changer. you know?
Yeah, no, I've done it. I've done it before. Yep. So it makes life a lot easier. Yeah.
I love it. Well, and then go over, I guess, the camera system that you guys are using. And you said that it does pick up ball flight. Is that just more the spin that it's picking up, or is it able to, not obviously not to the level of TrackMan, but like what right now, what can it actually pick up?
Yeah, so right now for pitching, I mean, we're pretty tightly focused in on the pitcher, right? 8 cameras, up to 16 right now, and we just track the ball the XYZ position, so it doesn't give us too much info for the pitcher. On the batting side, we get the ball incoming and outgoing, so that does really help on the batting side. But with the ball tracking, it's a separate 3 camera system, and we're actually tracking the seams of the baseball. So it's all optical. So at 500 frames per second or higher, we're still investigating um, the best optimal cameras, resolution, and frame rates. But right now, at over 500 frames per second, we're tracking the seams of the ball to get the spin metrics.
Yeah,
And
which
since everything's synchronized, we have the ball coming out of the pitcher's hand, we have the ball tracking in between, and we have the batting side. So we can even stitch the trajectory with the spin metrics to get, a number of different things.
yeah, that's awesome. What's been something that you've seen be used, and you don't have to name particular names or anything, but like through Kinetrax, what have you seen some people actually be able to pick out or notice outside of like what you said, like just having better questions? Was there anything not necessarily groundbreaking, but just something that was like, oh, maybe this is common sense, but why didn't we put two and two together or anything along those lines?
Well, pitch tipping for one,
Mm.
we can identify that if people are doing something different, pitchers are doing something different, whether it's where they're resting their glove before first move, whether it's tunneling, there's arm slot or arm abduction angle between one pitch type to another could be 15 or 20 degrees different. So that stuff's really easy to pinpoint with our system. Um, a number of different ways, looking at the angle, looking at the release point, plotting different time periods, even on top of each other, doing different comparisons. Um, Even when guys get hurt, you have baseline data for them. They get hurt, they're rehabbing. Sometimes they pick up compensations they don't even know
Mhm.
they picked up, and they're hard to shake, right? So maybe 2 months after they're back in the rotation or coming out of the pen, and their mechanics are off. It's because maybe they picked up some compensation. So there's a lot of things. I mean, there's so much data, it's hard to pinpoint things, right? But that's why you have to have sort of this focused kind of question. Okay, what is he doing different and why? And let's go down that rabbit hole, right? I mean, you can try to see cause and effect. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and you see this stuff all the time on like MLB Network. Guys change their stance, right? And sometimes they don't even understand. All right, their step width is different, right? Or they're shifting their weight differently. But we can identify all these things to within like millimeters to within a degree. That's how accurate it is. And that's why you need so much hardware, right? That's it. It does cost, the hardware. Like I said, so 8 to 16 cameras just focus in on the pitcher.
Yeah,
So
which is a lot.
it's not, yeah, it's right. It's not for every college baseball team out there. Unfortunately, not yet. The hardware is coming down, of course, just like anything else, but we still got a little ways to go.
Yeah, well, I think that'll definitely, as the technology improves and the cost of that goes down, I think it would make sense to at least have it some degree, whether it's just the pitching or, maybe the minimal amount of cameras, which would be 8 for the pitcher, 8 for the hitter, right?
Yeah, we could go less, but I mean, data quality, I recommend a minimum of 8. Really, can we do it with 5 or 6? We can, but if you're trying to change and measure within millimeters and degrees, you don't want to go down that low, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then, yeah, because that's just going to make sure that the data is clean and it's not picking up random spots, or like, if one of the cameras isn't there, it might identify, the wrist as the shoulder, or, something just completely off, right?
Yeah, so that's
Hopefully
why
not.
I would say, yeah, minimum 8 cameras is what we recommend. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, and then, I mean, to be honest, from what I'm hearing, like this is all pretty plug and play as it gets. When we talked about that before, but you just have it all set up, right, for the stadium. You're just making sure that that's all. You probably have a stadium background enough to where those cameras can set up, right? So like at the University of Arkansas Baum Stadium, like they have that backdrop to where they can still set up those cameras to be set up and catch everything that they can.
Yeah, so that's a permanent install, right? So we'll go in and because of sign stealing regulations at the MLB level, we're not allowed to put anything in the outfield. So we typically have 4 camera locations up the first baseline, 4 up the third baseline. And if there's pitching and batting systems like at Arkansas, there'll be a pitching and batting at each of those 8 locations, right? Mm-hmm. So 16 total cameras. But they're permanently installed. They're in temperature controlled, weatherproofed enclosures, and all those cameras run back to a centralized server. So really, there's not much work for anyone, to be done, other than we do have a game operator or stringer that tags the game. They basically hit start and stop, select the pitcher and batter throughout the game. We're working on automating that. It's not there yet.
There's probably a lot to recognize because there's a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we're working on it, but it's probably another, like, I wouldn't say next season, maybe the following season.
That quick.
But there's no setup. There's no real prep. They just come in, turn the system on. We actually have our data processing team. They'll go into every stadium, remote in, and they'll check on games during the day. If there's a game at Arkansas, they'll go in around noon and they'll make sure everything's functioning correctly. So when the game operator shows up at 6 o'clock or 6:30 to record at 7, they know that there's no issues. So,
which is huge.
So it's really turnkey. It's just, selecting the pitcher, batter, start, stop. And then at the end of the game, it's just hit process and just wait several hours for the data to be processed in a digestible, biomechanical, meaningful data set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, like we said before, it's like, hey, can you actually interpret it and apply it? Like that's obviously the end game there for sure. With the just to kind of stay on that same topic though, before I go on to something else. So you have the game set up on the stadiums. Now for the lab settings, are those permanent, or can you be able to move those around if needed?
No, they could be moved around if needed. Like ideally you'd have them up permanently, like Arkansas has them up permanently. Premier Pitching Performance, P3, one of our customers out of St. Louis, they take their system on the road. So they will put 8 cameras on tripods. They'll set it up. They'll go around to different universities, spend a day or two collecting data on those teams. So yeah, it's a little work. It takes probably an hour for a couple of guys to set the system up, probably half the time to pack it all up. but it is portable. It's just a little more work. If it's permanently set up, these guys just go up and start throwing on the mound, and someone's just hitting start and stop. And most of the time, they don't even know that, again, they're having data collected on them. So there's definitely some benefits to having it permanently set up, but if needed, totally it could be remote portable.
There. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I know some of the competitors, and I don't want to name names or anything, but some of them don't even pick up like either the bat or the ball. They're just, maybe picking up the person moving. So, and I think you need that information to even be able to tell like, hey, when impact happened, whenever for a guy hitting, or when the ball was actually released, right? To actually have some more context to that, right? Like, I think that's super valuable.
No, great point. And you're absolutely right. So, there's general biomechanics. Most motion capture companies are general, right? They provide a hardware system and software to capture that. And then you take that data, the end user, and they kind of go and do their own thing with it. I mean, we specialize in baseball. That's why we have these integrations with other vendors. Like I mentioned, that's why we track the objects. So it definitely is. It adds so much value, especially for batting, right? I mean, that's obvious. So that does kind of make us stand out a little more than the other companies, for sure. And we're also expanding into other sports. We just signed our first NBA organization, this summer. So we'll be in arena in their shooting lab as well this fall. So we'll track the basketball. We're into golf now, so we're tracking the club, the golf ball. So tracking objects, tennis rackets, any kind of, even cricket. We have a cricket system in the San Jose. Yeah, I can't believe I was out there a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I have no clue. I'm trying to learn cricket right now.
Right.
But just that's a different, their bat, they're
totally different. Hold it down and then
it's a different motion, but it's a different object. So how do you track it? Is it as easy as tracking a bat? There's a lot of flexibility in a golf club, right? The shaft. So how do we model that? So every time we introduce a new object, there's some things to think about. But
absolutely,
definitely adding those adds a ton of value to the data set for sure.
Yeah, I can see in the lab setting, like obviously you have the places like Titleist and whatnot, like they probably have markers on like the club head and then like in the end of the club to see like how much give is on those, right? But having that markerless, I guess unless you're identifying the club head and then the kind of like how you're doing from the bat and then going from the difference between the two, that would still be able to do the same thing similarly, right?
Yeah, so for the bat, it's pretty simple. Since it's so rigid, we track the knob and the tip of the bat, right at the top of the bat. But for golf, we may have 7 different virtual points, right? So we have, and that's why we train these models on millions of images, right? So we actually go in and hand annotate these different points. So it's a long, tedious process, but we capture the video. We go in there and just hand digitize basically these points and add it to this training set so that it automatically does this, right? And that's what makes our data so kind of, basically so accurate and so reliable, is that, the training set, the time, the money, and the care that we put into the training set so that we can measure some of these things that are, very difficult to measure automatically.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and then the more data you get, right, then it starts to normalize and you'll be able to see trends with that within the other sports.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. I know, obviously, I'm pretty sure TrackMan is in golf. They have like units and stuff, but what do they use for basketball? Do they have like something that also tracks like what you were talking about, the optic system for how they release it, what the spin's like on it?
Yeah, so there's another company out there that tracks the basketball now, and they spit out some metrics there. I think they only collect at 30 frames per second.
Okay.
But that's that company will ingest their data as well, but we're also going to track the ball ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's some things there that they're tracking that we're not, so it's worth that integration.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not TrackMan.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think it's
different.
called it's called Noah. I think it's Noah. Noah
Yeah,
is the name of that
gotcha.
company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's almost similar to like, the launch angle off of the bat is kind of like the launch of like, or I guess the arc of how they're releasing it and where it ends up going into the net. I
Yeah.
know Steph Curry probably had that down to where he's like, all right, if I'm within this range, it's gonna go in.
Yeah, he's got his own mocap system in his head. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, what would be something that I guess is a common either misinterpretation or maybe a misunderstanding that a lot of people, just maybe general say like, oh, hey, a biomechanist does this, but they don't maybe include or think of some of the other things that they could possibly do, either through using Kinetrax or, any system.
Um, you mean as a like profession or?
Yeah, just as the profession in general.
Well, I mean, you got to look at the holistic view, right? You can't just look at the mechanics. I mean, what's causing this? Is it the chicken or the egg kind of question? Is it mechanics? Is it, more mental? Is it, I think that as biomechanists, we have to be open to that, to consider all these other, you know, professions, I guess, or for lack of a better term there. But I think being open, it's not just, you can't just look at the biomechanics and that's not the answer, right? You can't just look at the mental, toughness or skills. I think we're at the point now where we can integrate all these different
Hmm.
um, data sets. And how do we look at it in a more holistic? So to kind of widen or broaden our horizons, I guess, and not just concentrate on, okay, this is the angle and this is why it's wrong. Well, why is that angle wrong? Is it, why? What's causing that?
Oh, sure. Oh,
Strength. Is it a
I love.
strength? Is it mental? It could be a lot of different things. So, sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, I got my degree in biomechanics. I just got my PhD. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, right? Like, what did you do with that? Or what have you done?
Yeah.
What kind of internships? Who have you worked with? Professional athletes are total different, than recreational. Or, hey, if you're working in a hospital system and in a gait analysis lab, okay, that's where your specialty lies. That's great. But then you can't just transfer all this stuff, all over the place without, this more holistic approach, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you said that too, because you need to take into account all the other environmental factors, or, it's raining outside, or it's, this might have happened, or, hey, this guy's coming back from an injury. Like, there's a lot of things that just the reports alone can't really tell you the full story, so
Yeah, you don't have to be an expert in everything, right? But you just want to be able to understand how these things work together.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love what you said there too, because you need to probably have some experience, but like let's say you're going from a gait analysis to then all of a sudden sports, like you're going from something very controlled to something very variable and have so many moving parts that you definitely need some type of experience before you can label yourself as an expert within within
No,
some.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well
awesome.
said.
I love it. I love it. Well, yeah, Scott, I think that's all the questions I had for you, unless you had anything else, kind of any closing remarks or how folks can get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, I would just say our website, just it's kinetrax.com. There's a submission form that would come directly to me. So that's a easy way to get in touch with me. We post a lot of things on LinkedIn. That's kind of our, we tweet some things out as well, but the LinkedIn will give you some good examples of what we do. Try to keep it fresh, change it up, look at the data in different ways, a lot of videos on there. So you could see kind of the tracking abilities, capabilities, how well we're doing it. But yeah, I'd say 95% of our business is, baseball, if not more. It's always going to be our bread and butter. But branching out now into the NBA, I definitely see the NBA as the next league that's going to take advantage of biomechanics like, baseball has. MLB. The college market, there's 300 D1 schools. So whether it's lab or in stadium, I really see that expanding even more. We're working with about 10 college teams right now, and even working with an NHL team. Proof of concept, tracking goalies. So there's a lot of potential there.
Absolutely. Do you ever
Yeah.
see this going into, I know it sounds crazy, but like football might be a possibility, or what do you think?
So I've talked to a number of teams. I see the training first. I think that's kind of easy because we can control that.
Right.
The problem is, and even with basketball, I mean, we're starting small. The goal is to track everybody on the court, right? But if you have 10 guys on the court and there's a lot of occlusion from, all the players getting in the way of each other being tracked,
Yeah.
how many cameras does that take? We don't know yet, right? So we're going to do free throws, some 3 points to start off this season, have that shooting lab. We're going to solve that problem first. And then, we get a lot of inquiries about football and soccer/football. It's just, there's such a huge, the field's enormous. So how do you keep a system that needs to be calibrated, right? We have to know where each of those cameras are, position orientation. That's how it all works. So how do you cover a football field, right? How do you just track the quarterback through a game? I don't think
Moves around so much. Yeah.
so we're not there yet. That might be another several years down the road. I mean, we'll get there. It's just it's not going to happen it's not this calendar year. I
Yeah,
promise.
for sure. Definitely not this calendar year.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's really cool to see though. And I don't know if you even saw this, but like to your point on the training side, I just recently saw a video of Alabama's sports science lab. So like they had the strength and conditioning and then an actual science lab where they have, something similar where they're doing like vertical jump testing and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I can see where this might, insert there. So
Yeah, and that's what they want to do for the basketball side. It's just, they want to do like functional movement activities as well. So it's not just going to be shooting around. It's going to be drop vertical jumps, measuring jump play, counter movement jumps, cutting maneuvers. The integration with force plates adds a whole nother layer of, data to investigate with the kinematics, with the kinetics. Coupling them together gives us a lot more information. So, the possibilities are, it's almost endless, I would say. It's again, just comes down to, hey, what are we trying to measure and what questions are we trying to answer and how do we track these guys to keep them healthy and get them better, right? I mean, that's the two key things there is, keep them in game, in competition, and try to get them improve performance. So
that's the name of the game right there.
yeah.
I love it. Well, Scott, appreciate your time and thanks for coming on. And for those of you listening, continue to stay in the zone.